But Mom, I want a Stellar Blade. Honey, this is Stellar Blade. I mean, she's not wrong. Hey folks, BlackCross here, and welcome back to another video game review, guys. Today's review, I'm going to be reviewing Wuchang Fallen Feathers. Another Souls-like game. And this is going to be the first time I'm ever going to say this since another previous title. This is the one Souls game that I'm a little mixed on. You know, that's hard for me to say, because while on the other hand, there are a lot of features that Wuchang has done to kind of change the game a little bit, you know, to change the Souls formula and everything like that. There's also some features that I feel was a little too much maybe to me, but we'll get to those problems when we get to them. So, first and foremost, Wuchang. So, what makes this different compared to most other Souls titles? Well, unlike most Souls titles where you're kind of varied up with different weapons, Wuchang is kind of limited in terms of the weaponry that you are going to be using. The weapons that Wuchang can use are as follows. You have the dual swords, you have the one-handed sword, you have the halberd, kind of like an axe-like weapon, you have a spear, and then a long sword. And while there may not be that many variety in terms of weaponry, in terms of like usage of the weapons or how they function, it is endless almost practically. And the reason why I say it's almost endless is because of the fact of the skill tree. Now, unlike in most Souls games, we're mostly known for having the ability to put points into our attributes, whether it be HP, strength, dexterity, luck, depending. But in Wuchang's case, it's actually a full-on skill tree, where you basically go through each individual node in terms of selecting what particular node you're going to be using. These could be any particular nodes known as either increasing your individual stats. It could be a node that allows you to increase your health points, perhaps maybe healing potential, magic, feathering, which we'll get to in a little bit, or weapon skills, which is definitely something that I didn't think we would see, but definitely something interesting. And while this may be cool to see, you may be asking yourself, wouldn't that mean that you would potentially mess up your builds? Well, the cool thing about Wuchang is the fact that technically you're not bound to those stats. You get to change out those nodes anytime you want to. So say, for example, you're working on something currently and it's not working for you, you can reset the entire board or anywhere else if you want to change out and then reconfigure it however way you feel up to. And so long as you have the necessary items, depending on whether it's for like healing or like potentially increased weaponry, weapon mastery, you know, depending on the various stats that is needed to continue on that particular build, you can pretty much change out anytime you want to at no additional cost, which is really nice. Ultimately though, if I would have to describe Wuchang's battle mechanics, it would be more of almost a tide between Bloodborne in terms of aggressiveness, or even that of Sekiro in terms of skill. For those that don't know, Sekiro had a very impressive battle mechanic. Very well on point, very well timed, but you also have to be very quick and very agile in terms of your timing for parrying and stuff of that nature. And Wuchang definitely carries that same factor. Depending on the skills, of course in this case disciplines, depends on what all you can do. Whether it's deflect, block, maybe you're able to execute a particular move, or maybe some kind of enhanced ability or something like that. Depending on that particular segment depends on how things go out and stuff like that. And I do like that. I do like how different it can be at times. The level design, however, though, holy crap, this game. Level design is so cryptic. Like, there are areas in the game in which where you will feel like as though as if you are turned around. And this is, of course, the fact that there is no actual map. I mean, most Souls games don't really have a map anyway, so traversing it is about as simplistic as any Souls game. Wuchang's case, it can sometimes feel like a Mobius strip, practically. So you'll be playing through the game, and you'll be thinking to yourself, do I need to go this way, or do I need to go that way? And depending on the direction of where you're going to be at and stuff like that, you could either continue going on in a straight line, or you can uncover a shortcut, which will make things a little bit easier in terms of traveling around the area and stuff like that. You know, anything that's Souls-related information, unlocking the shortcut, allowing you to get access back to your original rest point, and that way you don't have that long of a journey to go. which is very nice. And then, of course, the fact that you have your healing essence, your Gorg, or whatever you want to call it, is actually contributed to your skill trees, which is interesting. So next to skills, your weapon mastery, meaning that your weapon is like +5, +6, depending, instead of it being connected to like a separate menu, for example, a workshop or something like that, it is actually connected to your skill tree. So that's interesting. And then, of course, you have the different magic skills, And then, of course, these different magic skills, depending whether it's magic or feathering. And I still haven't quite figured out why it's a big difference, but there is a big difference between the damage output between the magic and the feathering. It depends on if the enemy is weak against more towards magic, or if it's weak against more towards feathering. So you'll have different magic abilities that allows you to do different types of status effect or damage outputs. So depending on how the build is going to be, that's where you're going to be contributing towards. So in other words, if you're contributing more of your nodes towards magic, you would want to use more of the magic damage base. And if you have some that's based on around feathering, you want to grab the skills that are more towards the feathering effect. Ultimately, when you think about it, Wuchang is a very complicated game. It can be. It has a lot of different terminology. For example, Skyborn Might, which is a completely new terminology that I didn't think I would ever hear, but there it is. And what it is essentially a weird action that happens. And what this action is that any perfect dodge, any perfect attack, any perfect deflect, anything perfectly executed depending on the circumstances will actually generate a feather. This feather is, of course, Wuchang's magic bar. Depending on how many feathers is lit up depends on the spell level that you can cast. So these spells, depending on what is required, so some will require 1 or 2, or sometimes upwards to the max, which is 5, of course. So obviously, depending on how well you're doing in terms of combat, depends on the rate that your spells are going to be put out and stuff like that. And this also contributes to another weapon known as a one-handed weapon, which is actually more connected to the feathering and magic. So in other words, depending on how that build goes on, also depends on how well the magic and feathering spells work as well. So all of these are pretty cool ideals. These are all pretty interesting ways to change up the game. But there's one change that I actually don't like. And sadly, I'm afraid to say this, but this is where it turned me off the most. What is that? Well, there's an actual smaller mechanic in the game known as madness. Now, madness can be built up in a number of ways. Most popularly, if you die a lot. And if you die a lot, what will happen is that Wuchang actually gets stronger. Her attack power does more damage. However, though, at the same time, too, you will also receive more damage in the process. So in other words, you become more of a glass cannon than a normal player. And if you don't know what the term is for glass cannon, what that means is basically you put out a lot more damage, but in turn, you're going to be receiving a lot more damage. So in most popular Souls builds, depending, their character will have like one hit away from dying, but they can do like extra amounts of damage, like half the boss health practically. And these are like some of the most popular, well-known strats. The only thing is, you have to not get hit. And that's where the Sekiro skill base comes in, is the fact that you have to be perfect at the game, or otherwise you're going to be dying a lot more. And this could present itself a sort of level of challenge, because the madness doesn't make things harder in terms of Wuchang receiving more damage. It becomes harder in the sense of you have to deal with your demon. Yes, so Wuchang in this game has an inner demon, which I guess has something to do with the feathering disease that she has in this game. But every single time you die, or any time, depending on how the madness is built up, if for some point it is at max, and you die and reset at the shrine, and you try to go back to retrieve whatever is at your red mercury and stuff like that, which is the soul's equivalent. Now, you don't lose all of it, which is a nice thing, but you do lose some accumulation of it. If for some reason you die and you try to go back to it, if your madness is at max, there is a possibility that you would have to fight your inner demon. And at the early parts of the game, she will kick your ass. Real easy, in fact. I would argue and say probably the hardest discipline that I've ever had to deal with in a game. You know, in most Souls game, you know, you die, you run the risk of having to go back and try to get what you've lost, only to then die before you even get it. So they're completely gone. In this case, there's a possibility you could run into a harder version of yourself, possibly. Which is something I didn't think I would run into. But I guess this is the game's way of actually contributing to, like, NPC invasions and stuff like that. So, that's interesting. But the other issue that I have with this game, and again, this goes back to the whole madness thing, are the bosses. The bosses are probably the most brutal and the most torturous fights that I've ever had to be a part of. Like, most of the fights that I've beaten in this game, I don't feel like I've actually earned that win, if you get what I'm saying. It feels like I had to find a way to kind of move around it to try to make it work, and then just kind of flinch into victory. You know what I mean? Like, it didn't feel like I earned it at all. It just, it didn't feel right to me. And what I mean is that in some cases, some of these bosses can only be beaten by certain methods. For example, this game actually has a backstab mechanic, but it's not a normal backstab. It's not like get behind the opponent and then you just hit attack them and stuff like that. No, it's more of you use your heavy attack, and if you hit them behind successfully, you are then able to contribute to a visceral-like attack. So, it's interesting to see that, but I was kind of getting annoyed at the fact that this could be a thing. And again, this kind of goes back into the idea that this is more Sekiro, because each boss / enemy has a stamina meter in the center of them, where the lock-on is, and depending on how full that gets, that could trigger a fish roll. So again, it's sort of like Sekiro, in which where if the bar gets full, you can then do a full-on attack that basically deals a heavy amount of damage to them and stuff. But the bosses, to me, again, was just so brutal. It was so brutal that I honestly wasn't enjoying the game at all. And again, this contributes to the fact of the madness. Now, yes, there is a way to remove the madness. There is a way to remove it. So, it's not like you can't get rid of it. You can get rid of the madness, whether it's by encountering your inner demon and having to fight it, or going to these different shrines and given a divine gift that gets rid of that madness. So there is that, and that can help in terms of the game. But at the later parts of the game, it gets a little bit ridiculous. And I can't stress this enough when I say this. I was actually building my build to this particular one build that I was seeing called the Vampire Dual Build. And what this is that this allows you to use dual blades and use your temperance, which I should have mentioned that earlier on. You have this mechanic that allows you to use temperance, which basically buffs up your weapon. And by using it, it can either give yourself an elemental attribute or increase status damage. For example, you can get shards for tempering that allows you to do extra strength damage, allows you to have extra agility, improve magic, or in some cases having different status effects, whether it's fire, poison, leech, which is where the vampire build goes into. Leech basically allows you to steal HP and fills your character HP bar. But if you ever get a chance to look up this build basically says itself, is that every single time you attack the boss, not only do they receive damage, but you will also be refilled of HP. So essentially you're continuously building HP and stuff like that. Though that would also mean you have to be right at the opponent's face in order to do that. Which also means, depending on how high your madness build is, there's a good chance that you could get one-shot it. bosses are not forgiving. These are the most brutalist. And there were times that I knew that any hit could be my last chance. This could be, you could get hit and then you got like 1 point of health left, and if you don't have enough healing attributes to help you, you're on the verge of, well, game over and everything like that. So yeah. And these bosses are torturous. These are some of the most gruesomest, most devastating, destructive bosses I've ever seen. Like, I feel like there's a balance issue when it comes to this. And again, this is just me talking. But I feel like due to the madness, it feels imbalanced. It feels like I'm constantly having to worry about not getting hit. And I've talked to several people about this and everything like that. It's like, yeah, duh, it's a Souls game. So naturally, getting hit once is consequential. But it's like, no, technically in terms of a traditional Souls game, you have a little bit more control of your builds, and you actually plan out your builds in terms of how you play. In my case, I would probably build my character out in terms of having a maximum amount of health, to where that way I can stay in the field long enough to enjoy the battle and not have to worry about dying instantly, and then concentrate on trying to perfect my dodges while in the fight, you know? In Wuchang's case, however, though, you don't have that freedom of control. It's more or less based on your nodes. So in other words, you go through the skill tree and everything like that, and you have the ability to go as far as you can with the nodes. Because of the fact that you can reset them, you see the full board then. So then you can see, okay, so I'm going to be doing this particular build, and I'm going to put more in terms of strength and health, depending on how the node pathway is going to be and stuff like that. But even then, that's not completely perfect. So, due to all of that, by the time I finally beat the game, I was wondering if I even wanted to platinum this game. Because every Souls-like game I've ever played that I've enjoyed, I've actually attempted / actually platinumed. And in Wuchang's case, halfway through New Game Plus, I was just like, am I having fun with this game? Do I really enjoy the torment of this game killing me constantly and beating my ass to a living puddle of mush to want to continue playing this? And my answer was no, sadly. It was sadly no. So, while I did enjoy Wuchang in terms of like the build structure of how the game is, it's imperfect imbalancement of how the madness gauge works. Now again, this depends on the person's perspective of the game. They may prefer to do more output of damage and stuff like that. And again, going back to the skill tree, there are skill tree points that actually activate for the madness. So depending on if it's 50% or 90% madness, depends on what type of added tribute it does towards your character build and stuff like that. So really it depends, but for me, I'm not that good at the game to where I would want to accept that. I would rather have normal ass defense and HP consumption and not do as much damage, but actually stay in the fight long enough to learn how to fight the boss. I actually get to enjoy the boss by trying to endure myself against the attacks and everything like that. Versus Wuchang, where I'm actually going to potentially die at any second during that fight. There could be any point in time that the boss will just make you flinch and then just finish you off right there. Like, you could just trip up and the boss will just go right there and just kill you right on the spot. There's no forgiven in this game. And this goes back to the whole ideal that this is related to like how Sekiro is. Sekiro, you have to be perfect at the timing mechanic. And if you're not perfect at the timing mechanic, bosses will just straight up destroy you. Some of these bosses will straight up murder, destroy you, spit on you, doesn't matter. They have no respect for you whatsoever. They will just destroy you. Wuchang is very much in that same perspective, in the fact that if you are not perfect at the game, you are going to feel the hurt. I would give a rating for Wuchang, but I'm afraid that the rating would be unfair. And I say unfair because Sekiro was the one Souls game I couldn't beat. Like, I never beat Sekiro. If you ever saw me do a Let's Play of Sekiro years ago, I was at the final boss and I couldn't do it. I just couldn't. I lost myself in the sense of that I just couldn't beat him. So instead, I just went on ahead and moved on to the next thing I wanted to play and stuff like that. And I still, to this day, never beat Sekiro. Now, Wuchang I did beat, but I didn't really want to go through it again knowing how frustrating and head-inducing the bosses were and stuff like that. And really, in all honesty, if you're struggling through a game and you're not having fun, don't torture yourself. So what I would say is this, is that if you enjoyed it Sekiro and you are really good at Sekiro, like say for example, out of all the Souls titles, Sekiro is your top favorite. If it is, Wuchang would be just as good. You would enjoy Wuchang in a heartbeat, and I feel like the challenge would match up to your skill level. Now, if for some reason you are a Souls player and you've never played Sekiro, or even beaten it for that matter, don't purchase Wuchang, because you'll find out real quickly how punishing this game really is. And I don't want to ruin it for the people who do enjoy the game, because again, I've got friends that have been playing Wuchang and they enjoy the game for what it is. I couldn't enjoy it because of how difficult the game was. Sorry for those of you that was hoping for a rating, but I can't give it the proper rating it deserves because of how freaking torturous I had to go through. Keep in mind, I did beat the game, but I didn't platinum it, and really I didn't have that much fun trying to survive and everything like that. So while I did enjoy at the start of it, I ended up despising it later on. So that's my reason for not really giving it a proper rating review. But again, these reviews are mostly for like recommending. If it's a game that I would recommend to somebody, then that's a game that I would recommend them and stuff like that. And in this game case, I can't really give it a proper recommendation without acknowledging the fact that, hey, if you like Sekiro, you would like Wuchang. If you don't like Sekiro, don't bother with Wuchang, because that would be unfair to those who do enjoy Wuchang. So, anyway guys, thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you in the next video. This is BlackCross signing off. Catch you guys later.